Jerry Krause is right there, and Jerry's not here. Obviously, I don't know who invited.
15 seconds from Game 7 or from champ.
After 18 months away from the game, he decided to return to the hardwood. And when he resumed his career, he and the Bulls continued making history.
Rarely do I get the chance to talk about him, but the thing that I do remember all the time, I think about him.
September 11th, 2009, Springfield, Massachusetts, the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame. Michael Jordan had just reached the pinnacle of every pinnacle, the greatest individual honor the sport could bestow, on the night when the basketball world gathered to celebrate everything he had given the game. And what did Michael Jordan do with that microphone? He settled scores. He thanked the man who cut him from his high school varsity team. He named the veterans he believed had frozen him out of the 1985 All-Star Game. He called out a Utah Jazz wing he had beaten in the finals 11 years earlier. He mentioned his former general manager, a man who had won 6 championships alongside him, and implied the man hadn't been invited. By the time Jordan finished speaking, half the room was laughing uncomfortably, and the other half was quietly stunned. So what does it tell you about a man when the moment the entire world wants to celebrate him, the first thing on his mind is a list of people who wronged him, who underestimated him, who he decided didn't measure up? Because Michael Jordan didn't just compete, he cataloged. He filed grievances the way other people file taxes. Every player who flopped in his presence, every teammate who showed up soft, every opponent who talked and couldn't back it up, he kept the receipt stored in a mental filing cabinet and drew on it when the next big game came around. And when you trace that pattern back to where it started, you find something that may have lit the fuse for everything that followed. February 10th, 1985. Jordan is a rookie. He's barely 2 months into his first season, already averaging over 28 points per game, already the most electrifying first-year player anyone has seen in years. He gets to Indianapolis for the All-Star game, walks into the locker room, and then, almost nothing. The ball barely finds him. The veterans run the game. Whether it was an organized freeze-out or simply how the established stars played among themselves has been debated ever since. But Jordan felt it as deliberate. He felt the veterans look at him and decide he hadn't earned a seat at their table yet. He mentioned it in his Hall of Fame speech nearly a quarter century later. That detail matters. Because what you're about to see isn't a list Jordan ever sat down and formally compiled. He never released a ranked fraud roster. He never called a press conference and said, "These are the 10 men who didn't deserve to share a court with me." What he did instead was far more damaging. He exposed them through the actual games, through post-series interviews, through documentary footage, through a Hall of Fame speech that reads like a revenge screenplay. And when you line those players up in order, when you understand what each one did to earn his contempt, the picture of Michael Jordan that emerges is at once the most terrifying competitor in NBA history and perhaps the most unforgiving. Let's start where Jordan's patience first ran out. When Chicago selected Stacey King 6th overall in the 1989 draft, the expectation was a powerful, mobile big who could hold his own in the post and contribute immediately. King was a McDonald's All-American, a standout at Oklahoma, the kind of prospect that justified a top 10 pick. And then he joined a team that had Michael Jordan. Jordan's standard for teammates wasn't brutal in the way that word is typically applied in sports. It was surgical. He didn't just want effort, he wanted elite effort, the kind that matched what he believed he brought every single night. And when a player arrived out of shape, or played without urgency, or collected minutes without consequences, Jordan turned on them in ways the rest of the locker room could feel instantly. Sam Smith's book, The Jordan Rules, published in 1992, documented what happened when King reported to camp carrying extra weight. Jordan didn't pull him aside privately. He didn't offer encouragement. He led the ridicule publicly, dubbing King Doughboy in front of teammates, making the nickname stick the way only the most merciless locker room mockery can. The specifics of what was said varied across retellings, but the spirit was entirely consistent. Jordan saw King as a player whose body and effort didn't justify his draft position, and he said so in the bluntest possible terms. King spent 4 seasons with the Bulls, won 3 championships on the back of Jordan's brilliance, and never developed into the interior presence the franchise had hoped for when they spent that 6th pick. He wasn't singled out for being a bad person, he was singled out for not being hungry enough, not being tough enough, not meeting the standard that Jordan had silently set as the only acceptable one. In Jordan's private taxonomy, that was its own category of fraud. If King represented one tier of Jordan's impatience, Will Purdue represented a different one entirely. Drafted 11th overall in 1988, Purdue was a backup center on the Bulls championship teams, a role player whose primary function was to stay out of the way and do the small things right. But Jordan had a particular problem with Purdue during practice, and the problem was specific: the screens. Horace Grant was there when it happened. During a practice session in the early 90s, Purdue was setting screens that Jordan found illegal, impeding his movements in ways that had nothing to do with basketball. It irritated Jordan the way everything that wasn't elite irritated Jordan. And then Jordan punched him. Not a shove, a punch. Purdue arrived at the team's next obligation with a black eye. That story sounds extreme. It was. But it was also deeply revealing about how Jordan processed the line between acceptable and unacceptable teammate behavior. To a player who averaged over 30 points, who won scoring titles, who carried a franchise on his back every fourth quarter, a backup center who couldn't even run a legal screen in practice wasn't just an annoyance. He was an insult to the standards Jordan had set for what it meant to wear a Bulls uniform. Will Purdue wasn't a fraud in the league's eyes. He was a fraud by Jordan's, which in that locker room was the only measurement that counted. Now we get to a man Jordan didn't just dismiss, a man Jordan despised. Bill Laimbeer was many things to the Detroit Pistons. He was a two-time champion. He was a critical piece of one of the most brutally effective defensive teams the NBA had ever assembled. And he was the centerpiece of what the league's own coaches privately called dirty basketball, a physical scheme designed not to stop Michael Jordan cleanly, but to hurt him, wear him down, and make him understand that every trip to the basket carried a physical cost. The Jordan rules were Detroit's system: guard Jordan at half court, make every drive into the lane a collision. Hit him after every shot hard enough to leave a message, not quite flagrant enough to force an ejection. Laimbeer was the enforcer of that system, the player whose reputation for dirty play was so well established that even Larry Bird publicly criticized him. Jordan backed up Bird's assessment without any hesitation. But here's what Jordan understood about Laimbeer that casual fans often miss. The contempt wasn't about the physical contact in isolation. Jordan was famously not soft, famously not someone who ran from anything. It was about the purpose of the contact. Laimbeer wasn't competing. He was trying to make Jordan quit. And the thing about Michael Jordan was that there was no version of events, in any game, in any series, on any floor, in which he was going to quit. So Laimbeer's entire approach, the one that was supposed to be the Pistons' tactical masterstroke, was, by Jordan's reckoning, built on a fraud it would never actually achieve. And yet above Laimbeer on every list Jordan ever kept, implicit or explicit, was Laimbeer's point guard. Isiah Thomas was a Hall of Famer, a 12-time All-Star, a two-time champion, and arguably the best small point guard the game had ever produced. Jordan himself in certain interviews acknowledged that talent directly. He called Thomas the best point guard in the league behind Magic Johnson, and then in almost the same breath made clear that he hated him, that the hate was real, that it had never softened, and that it carried through to every day he said those words. The Chicago-Detroit rivalry of the late 1980s was the most hostile collision happening anywhere in professional basketball. The Pistons eliminated the Bulls in the Eastern Conference playoffs in 1988, then again in 1989, then again in 1990. 3 consecutive years. 3 consecutive times Jordan watched his team fall short. His individual statistics magnificent and his ring count unmoved at 0. By the time the 1991 Eastern Conference Finals arrived and Chicago finally swept Detroit in 4 games, the grudge between Jordan and Thomas wasn't a simmer anymore. It was a full boil. So when the final seconds ticked off the clock at the Palace on May 27, 1991, and the Bulls completed a sweep that ended the Pistons' back-to-back championship reign, Thomas and most of his teammates did something that confirmed every grievance Jordan had ever filed. They walked off the court without shaking hands, without a word to the Bulls, without acknowledging the moment in any conventional way. It was a visible public declaration that the Pistons believed they were above the normal codes of competition, and Jordan cataloged that detail permanently. The Dream Team followed in 1992. The United States assembled arguably the greatest basketball roster in history for the Barcelona Olympics, and Isiah Thomas was not on it. The official explanations ranged from chemistry concerns to roster limitations, but reporting from Jack McCallum's book on the Dream Team and from multiple journalists who covered the selection process painted a picture in which Jordan's opposition to Thomas played a meaningful role. Jordan, when asked about it years later during The Last Dance, denied actively lobbying against Thomas by name. Thomas denied many things about that relationship over the years as well, but the outcome was not in dispute. Isiah Thomas, a Hall of Famer, a champion, the face of back-to-back title teams. One of the defining players of an era, watched the 1992 Olympics from home while Michael Jordan went to Barcelona and helped the United States win gold. Whatever Jordan's precise role in that selection, he certainly didn't lose sleep over the result. By the time the New York Knicks reached the 1993 Eastern Conference Finals, they believed they had found a credible answer. They had Patrick Ewing anchoring the paint, they had a suffocating half-court defensive scheme, and they had John Starks, a fierce, aggressive wing who had somehow manufactured a career out of guarding players far more celebrated than him, who thrived on hostility and noise and the specific electricity of Madison Square Garden. For 2 games, it looked like New York might have something real. The Knicks won the first 2 games of that series. Starks' pressure was disruptive and physical, constantly in Jordan's face, and there were possessions where the ball stalled, where Jordan's rhythm got scrambled, where the defensive approach seemed like it might this time actually be enough. Game 4 of that series was May 31st, 1993. Jordan scored 54 points, not a season high in some regular season context, 54 points in an Eastern Conference Finals game against the tightest defense in the league. The Bulls won 105-95. The series, which had looked like a genuine upset 2 games earlier, shifted completely. Chicago took it in 6. That was the answer to John Starks' defense. Starks went on to have a long career, went on to reach the finals the following year during Jordan's first retirement. Went on to shoot 2 for 18 from the field in the deciding Game 7 against Houston, a performance so devastating it became its own permanent historical footnote. But in the Jordan era, the Starks defensive project ended in a single game on May 31st, 1993, 54 points from the man he was supposedly containing. Jordan didn't need to say a single word about what that meant. By the 1997-98 season, Jordan was operating at a different altitude of psychological certainty. He had 4 rings. He was building toward a 6th. And in April of 1998, he gave ESPN the magazine an interview so brutally candid about his peers that it reads now like the blueprint for everything the Hall of Fame speech would eventually formalize. Alonzo Mourning was, by almost any measure, a player who commanded genuine respect. He was a Defensive Player of the Year contender, an elite rim protector, one of the most physically intimidating presences the Eastern Conference had seen in years. He was known for his intensity, for his willingness to get in anyone's face, for the belief that he could physically dominate any situation he walked into. Jordan's assessment, delivered in that 1998 interview, cut straight through all of it. Speaking about Dennis Rodman's ability to get inside opponents' heads, Jordan arrived at Mourning with this: Alonzo's weak in the mind. He has to know how to be tough and overlook those types of things. Alonzo's an intimidator, but sometimes the intimidator can be intimidated. The bully can be bullied. That's not a player Jordan called a fraud of skill. Mourning could play. Jordan knew it. But in Jordan's framework, the game was only partially about what you could do physically. Toughness, real toughness, the kind that doesn't buckle when someone takes a run at your psyche, was the other half. And Jordan had watched Rodman, a player with almost no conventional offensive game, get into Mourning's head and disrupt him. In the league Jordan played in, a man who could be rattled at the mental level was a man who wasn't entirely who he claimed to be. But the player who drove Jordan to something closer to genuine, sustained irritation, not contempt exactly, not hate, but the specific frustration of someone whose style felt like a personal affront to every correct thing about basketball, was Reggie Miller. In that same 1998 ESPN magazine interview, Jordan addressed Miller directly. "I don't really dislike anybody in the league," he said, "but playing Reggie Miller drives me nuts. It's like chicken fighting with a woman. His game is all this flopping type thing. He weighs only 185 pounds, so you have to be careful. Don't touch him, or it's a foul. On offense, I use all my 215 pounds and just move him out. But he has his hands on you all the time. I just want to beat his hands off because it's illegal. It irritates me." What makes that quote remarkable isn't the harshness, it's the specificity. Jordan wasn't calling Miller a bad player. Miller was a Hall of Famer, one of the greatest shooters in NBA history, a player with legendary playoff performances scattered across his career. Jordan was calling Miller's method illegitimate. The flopping, the contact drawing, the use of officiating as a competitive weapon to Jordan, that was the basketball equivalent of cheating on a test and then demanding credit for the grade. The only full playoff series between the two men came in the 1998 Eastern Conference Finals, a 7-game grind that Chicago won. Jordan averaged roughly 32 points through that series. Miller did not deliver against Jordan the kind of defining playoff performance he had produced against other opponents in other moments. And when the Bulls closed it out, and Jordan's assessment from that magazine interview was already on public record, the final chapter of that rivalry read exactly as he had written it months earlier. Reggie Miller played well enough to compete. He just didn't play honestly enough to respect. June 14, 1998. Utah Jazz leading Game 6 of the NBA Finals, 86-85, 41 seconds remaining. Michael Jordan steals the ball from Karl Malone in the post. He pushes up court, surveys the floor, and settles his eyes on Bryon Russell at the top of the key. What happened next is one of the most analyzed possessions in basketball history. Jordan moved left, crossed back right, and rose over Russell for a pull-up jumper that fell through the net as the clock ran towards 0. Bulls 87, Jazz 86, Chicago's 6th championship. Game over. Whether Jordan pushed off Russell before the shot has been debated ever since. Jordan in The Last Dance was characteristically unequivocal. Everybody said I pushed off. Bullshit. Russell himself, years later, acknowledged Jordan was making that shot regardless of what preceded it. The push-off debate is genuine, and the visual evidence is honestly ambiguous. But within the Jordan mythology, that specific detail matters less than what preceded it, because the origin of Bryon Russell's presence in that story goes back years before the 1998 Finals. In his 2009 Hall of Fame speech, Jordan recounted a story from 1994 during his baseball retirement. Russell, then a young Jazz player, encountered Jordan in a workout setting and reportedly suggested he could guard him. Jordan remembered it exactly as it happened. He repeated it to the entire basketball world 15 years later. From this day forward, Jordan told the Hall of Fame crowd, "If I ever see him in shorts, I'm coming at him." He did. Bryon Russell was not a fraud as a defender. He was capable. He played in an NBA Finals. But Jordan's framing of the story was precise to the point of being merciless. Russell had talked, Russell had implied an ability he couldn't prove, and Jordan had stored that implication and eventually turned it into the most famous shot of the decade. In Jordan's courtroom, talking without delivering was the clearest, most unambiguous form of fraud that existed. Now we arrive at something different. Something messier. Something that sits at the intersection of Jordan's greatest accomplishment and one of his most complicated legacies, because every player on this list so far was a rival, an opponent, or a teammate who fell short of Jordan's standard while Jordan evaluated them from some established position of superiority. The next player was something else entirely. He was Michael Jordan's choice, the 2001 NBA draft. Jordan was no longer playing. He was the president of basketball operations for the Washington Wizards, the man with the most celebrated basketball instinct alive, making roster decisions that would shape a franchise. When the first overall pick arrived, Jordan selected Kwame Brown, a 17-year-old forward from Brunswick, Georgia, who had never played a college game, a teenager who became the first high school player ever taken first overall in NBA history. The projections were enormous. Brown was 6'11" with athleticism, length, and the physical profile that scouts associate with generational interior players. The expectations attached to the #1 pick were already staggering. The expectations attached to being Michael Jordan's #1 pick were something else entirely. Brown's rookie numbers were modest: 4, 5 points and 3, 5 rebounds in limited minutes. His second year improved slightly. In the 2003-04 season, his third, he posted 10, 9 points and 7, 4 rebounds per game, which was enough to suggest he might yet approach the player the pick had implied. But the arc never continued upward. Injuries, inconsistency, and a career that eventually took him through 7 franchises over 12 seasons left him with career averages of 6 points and 5 rebounds, numbers that, measured against the #1 overall pick, told a story that was impossible to argue with. Meanwhile, in that same 2001 draft, the Memphis Grizzlies selected Pau Gasol third overall. Gasol went on to win 2 championships, make 6 All-Star teams, and compile a Hall of Fame career. Tony Parker went 28th in that same draft, would win 4 championships of his own, and is also in the Hall of Fame. Jordan's relationship with Brown during the 2 years they overlapped in Washington. Jordan returned as a player from 2001 to 2003, was reported to be withering. Multiple accounts describe Jordan as publicly harsh with Brown in practice, the same kind of unrelenting pressure he had applied to Stacey King and Will Purdue a decade earlier. Now scaled to a player carrying the weight of the top overall pick. Brown, in later interviews and a lengthy public response in 2021, rejected claims that Jordan had made him cry, pushed back against the bust designation, and argued he had been set up to fail by circumstances that extended beyond his own abilities. Both things can carry some truth. Brown had genuine limitations that his career ultimately confirmed. The environment around him was also genuinely punishing, but the historical record is unambiguous on the central fact. Jordan picked him first, Jordan presided over his development, and Jordan's eye, the most celebrated basketball instinct alive, did not see accurately what was actually there. In a career built on never being wrong about the game, that was the most consequential miscalculation Jordan ever made. And the player who had to carry the weight of that error was 20 years old when it started. But the most complicated relationship on this entire list, the one that never resolved cleanly, the one that turned a teammate into an antagonist across 3 separate decades, was Michael Jordan and Horace Grant. Grant won 3 championships alongside Jordan. He was a key piece of the first three-peat, a switchable forward who could defend multiple positions, make the right pass, and complement Jordan's offense without demanding a central role in it. By any conventional measure, Grant was exactly what a great teammate was supposed to look like. Sam Smith's book, The Jordan Rules, published in 1992, pulled back the curtain on the internal dynamics of the Bulls championship teams in a way that made the organization uncomfortable and made Jordan specifically furious. The book included details about internal conflicts, Jordan's behavior toward teammates, Phil Jackson's coaching methods, information that Jordan concluded could only have come from inside the locker room. His conclusion was that Horace Grant was the primary source. He held that belief privately for years, and then in 2020, when The Last Dance revisited the story in front of a global audience of tens of millions, Jordan expressed that belief on camera, for the record. Grant's response was immediate and emphatic. He called Jordan's claim a downright, outright, completely lie. He went further, labeling Jordan himself a snitch for airing internal locker room dynamics in a public documentary. Sam Smith, the journalist who wrote the book, indicated over the years that his sourcing was not confined to a single individual, and so the most complicated entry on this list sits permanently unresolved. Jordan believed Grant betrayed the team. Grant denied it absolutely and fired back. The documentary that reignited the argument was itself disputed by multiple people who appeared in it. What you're left with is not a fraud story in the basketball sense. Grant's contributions were genuine, his championships were earned, but something more personal and more corrosive. If Jordan was right, it was a loyalty fraud. The worst category in his private framework, not a player who couldn't perform, but a man who couldn't be trusted when the door closed. If Jordan was wrong, it was something else. The story of a competitor so accustomed to controlling every narrative around him that even his mistakes in memory became someone else's fault. The truth of that particular story may not be entirely knowable. What is knowable is that Jordan went to that claim as he has gone to every claim in his life, without wavering, without revision, without apology, and with the absolute certainty of a man who has never once believed he was the one who got it wrong. So that's 10 players, 10 different shapes of the word fraud, none of them exactly the word Jordan used in any documented statement, all of them precisely what he communicated through his actions, his interviews, his documentary footage. And a Hall of Fame speech that functioned more as a settlement of accounts than a thank you. A teammate who showed up out of shape. A backup center who couldn't set a legal screen. A Detroit enforcer who built a career on hurting the game's best player. A point guard whose absence from the greatest roster ever assembled may have owed something to Jordan's voice. A Knick who tried to lock Jordan down and surrendered 54 points for the effort. A Miami big who Jordan decided was mentally soft beneath all the physical intimidation. An Indiana shooter whose entire method felt like a rigged game dressed up as basketball. A Jazz wing who made a remark Jordan remembered for 15 years and paid for it with the most famous shot of the decade. A #1 pick who became the most visible miscalculation Jordan ever made. And a teammate who may or may not have talked when silence was what loyalty required. What connects all 10 of them isn't a single press conference, a published list, or a documented phrase. It's a standard so singular, so uncompromising, so completely disconnected from what normal competition looks like that nearly every player who came close enough to be evaluated eventually fell short of it. Michael Jordan did not keep a fraud list. He kept a scoreboard. And on that scoreboard, no matter who the opponent was, no matter what the circumstances were, no matter how many years had passed, the score was always the same. Michael Jordan won. Everyone else explained why.